HR issues can kill you. One complaint against your company can turn your world upside down. And you spend way too much time dealing with HR when you should be spending your time on making a profit. You should talk to Bambi. With Bambi, get access to your own dedicated US-based HR manager starting at just $99 per month. They get to know you and your business while providing HR expertise and the personal touch you need and want. They're available by phone, email, and real-time chat, so onboarding and terminations run smoothly. Team members reach peak performance, and your business stays compliant with changing HR regulations. And with Bambi's HR Autopilot, you'll automate important HR practices like setting policies, training, and feedback. HR managers can easily cost $80,000 a year, but Bambi starts at $99 per month. Schedule your free conversation today to see how much Bambi can take off your plate. Go to Bambi.com right now and type in Accelerate under podcast when you sign up. It'll really help the show. Spelled BAM, BEE.com. Bambi.com. Type in Accelerate.
Me, but also you. The Pharaoh fast forwards his favorite foreign film, Powder Donut. Okay, what's my line?
The only line I see here on the script is get options based on your budget with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive.
Oh man, that's a tongue twister, huh? I'm sorry, I'm gonna need a few more minutes. Bulbous Walrus, the Bulbous Walrus.
The Name Your Price tool, only from Progressive.
The owl ran afoul of the comatose coxswain.
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Welcome to Accelerate Your Business Growth with your host, Diane Helbig. Diane is a leading small business development and leadership coach, author, and speaker who is passionate about sharing valuable ideas, tips, and techniques with business professionals worldwide. Diane brings you the world's experts and gurus in all things business, whether it's sales, structure, social media, planning, or plateauing. Guests bring their expertise and energy to each episode. When growing your business is your focus, Accelerate Your Business Growth is the show to listen to. Got a topic or guest suggestion? Let Diane know. The goal is to make sure you have the information you need to move your business forward. Thanks for joining us. Settle in and enjoy.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Today's podcast is sponsored by Audible.com. Audible.com is the leading provider of spoken audio entertainment and information. Listen to audiobooks whenever and wherever you want. Get a free book when you sign up for a 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/businessgrowth. Accelerate Your Business Growth podcast is thrilled to be included on a number of lists of the best podcasts to listen to, from Inc.com to Fit Small Business, Proven, MSNBC's Your Business, and a whole bunch of other sites. We are really gaining recognition as a resource for small business entrepreneurs and sales professionals. This is due in large part to the wonderful guests that I have been honored to speak with over the years. These are folks who have expertise in, just a multitude of areas that have to do with business. They join me here. They give of their time and their talent and their knowledge so that you folks, the listeners, can do better things in your business. We have such a guest today. Joining me today is Rick Snyder. Rick is an international business coach, writer, speaker, and consultant who has launched 3 businesses. He's an expert in mentoring, training, and teaching others how to utilize the process of bringing intuition into an effective business plan and company culture. His breakthrough strategies have been implemented by executives and businesses in Europe, Canada, Asia, and America. He's lived the past few years in France and brings a global perspective to his teachings. Thank you so much for joining me today, Rick.
Thank you for having me, Diane.
I am thrilled. I was telling you before we started recording that this intuition is one of my favorite subjects. I believe strongly in it, and am so glad that we are talking about it so that the audience maybe either further embraces or gets a better perspective on it. Now, interestingly, you talk about it for business, which I also, believe in. But can you talk some about like the value of letting tuition guide decisions in business, and why you think that is such a valuable thing?
Yes. So often, as we know in the business world, whether we think about business, education, getting your MBA or what have you, or typical business practice, so much is spoken to about analytics, metrics, spreadsheets, data, and we're really in an age of big data, and we have more information than we know what to do with in today's world than ever before. So not only does that get overwhelming, but what often happens is we start to crowd out the space from our inner data that we also are collecting. And so to me, that's what intuition is actually about, is really listening to the inner signals and the indicators that we're actually picking up on all the time around us, whether that's in a meeting room or on a sales call, or even with anticipating your marketplace. There's a lot of great information that's happening within that I believe is meant to balance out the outer data, the outer metrics, versus only relying on one or the other.
Oh, okay. So if I'm hearing you right, you're saying they can work together.
Exactly. So often what I find is that people either align themselves on one camp, and they're either the intuitives who don't want to deal with money and sales and numbers and metrics and targets, and they feel like they're allergic to them, which I work with a lot of creatives, and so I've experienced that quite a lot. And then the other side is the more logical data scientists, engineers, who think that intuition is just hocus pocus and doesn't apply to the real world.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting because each camp, in my opinion, is missing out on something so valuable, because there really is something in a more integrative approach where you're learning to pay attention to those inner signals and learning to trust that relationship with yourself and those around you. But at the same time, you're also not ignoring doing the research and learning the metrics and making sure you're doing your due diligence on anything that you're pursuing.
Yeah, this is so fascinating. As you're talking, I keep thinking about when I teach or speak about sales, one of the things that I talk about is not focusing on selling so that you can pick up the signals that are being sent to you. And we don't, because we're so focused someplace else, but it's allowing that, your gut to play a role in helping you identify who you should be working with and shouldn't be working with.
Precisely. In fact, that's one of my favorite conversations there is the sales conversation. And when I look back at this, I've also been a salesperson myself on a 100-person team and got some great training. And one of the things I appreciated was just starting to tune into the nonverbal communication and all the things that happen in the spaces between the words, between the stages of a sales process. And really it starts to train you. Are you really listening to the person you're speaking to? Are you really listening to the prospect and getting their world and using your intuition? And in my opinion, really good salespeople are using their intuition all the time. They just might not call it that, and they might not know that they're consciously doing that.
Yeah, I completely agree with that for sure. That's really interesting. So let's talk about it also with like hiring and firing, because this is an area where I think people should be using their intuition far more than they do. I think they reason and they rationalize too much. So how I mean, I guess I have a couple questions. One is, what do you think about that? And two, if you think that we could be using our gut, how would we do that to hire and, I guess, fire more effectively, but hopefully hire more effectively?
Yeah, it's a great question. So yes, I do think this is one of the key elements that often gets missed in a hiring or recruiting process. And once again, like we were saying, it's easy to focus on the outer metrics. So what does that look like in the hiring process? We get too attached to the resume and the great education or school they went to or whatever training they might have. But here's the thing. Someone could have the best training, the best schools, the best certifications, but it doesn't mean that they're going to fit your company culture. It doesn't mean they're going to know how to work with your customer and that they're going to be able to work on your team. And so that's really where the intuition comes in handy, is really getting a feel for the person in front of you. And of course, the other hard part about hiring is that every candidate is selling their best self to you. You're seeing their best version of themselves. And it's really hard sometimes to get underneath that of who are they really? And what makes them tick? Where do they really excel? What are their fears? What are their aspirations? Sometimes it takes a lot of work to get underneath what they're selling you in that moment, because of course they want the job. And so it makes sense. But that's where the intuition piece comes in so handy, is really learning to trust your gut and feel for your own company culture, your own company values and direction and vision. And also just feeling out, hey, do I feel a resonance with this person? Is there any red flags that's coming up for me for any reason at all? Do I feel compelled to ask a question that's off script?
Okay. So then, is it okay? Let's say you go through the whole interview process with somebody, and on paper, they look like the ideal candidate. And as they're talking to you, they're saying all the right things, but you've just got this nagging feeling that they're just not a fit. Is that good enough to say, thank you so much, we're not going to be moving forward at this time?
So I've actually had this happen recently with a company that I coach in Arizona. And just as you're saying, they had the perfect candidate on paper. She interviewed very well for the position. And yet there still was this gut feeling that the CEO had that, I don't know why. It doesn't make sense to my mind. It doesn't, match my logic here, but I just get this feeling that she's just not the fit. Oh. And so just as you're saying, I would advise, and I did advise, you got to listen to that and trust that. But you also still need to ask around. We all do have our biases and assumptions. And that's where it gets really tricky, right? Is it intuition, or do I have a bias?
So, okay. So that's such a good point. So should they have other people interviewing the person, internally?
Right. So you're right. That's where it's really good to have extra pairs of eyes, maybe a couple different sets of interviews, especially if it's a really important candidate for your company, or a higher level manager or senior management, or someone on the leadership team, et cetera. That's where, yes, you do want to have a few sets of interviews, really be with them in the process. But there's also things you can do that really have you see what happens off script. There's the classic thing that Google does where they actually grab a beer, a drink or something with the candidate, and it's really a chance to get to know them as a person off the record, if you will. And a lot of times people will share more about themselves in that hour or that half hour than you got to see during the staged interview. Or even, what they call the 5 minutes of walking them to their car in the parking lot, where it's just really casual, the meeting's over, but you're still actually interviewing them. You're still getting a sense of who they are and if they're a fit. And so I think building in some of those strategies is really helpful, because you get even more intuitive reads on who they are, what they're capable of, if they're a fit for your company.
That's fascinating. I never would have thought about that those are really good ideas.
In fact, the company that I told you about in Arizona, they went through a few screenings. I actually was there coaching on site, and they had the whole company come out for a drink to meet the new potential staff member. And I can only imagine how intimidating that must be for the person. But
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty intense, right? You have like 30 plus people or whatever in the space. But it's amazing to see how this person handled that, and they ended up getting hired, and they were the right fit.
Wow. That is great. That's so interesting to me. So, shoot, I just had a question that totally left my head. Oh, I know what it was. Is there something that a person can do to make sure that they're paying attention? Because I was just listening to that, your explanation, and it made so much sense to me. But the thought that kept coming into my head is, yeah, and they have to really make sure that they're paying attention to all of that stuff, that they're present, that they're not focused on the outcome.
Exactly. Exactly. Just like with sales, right? It's so easy
Yeah,
for a salesperson to focus on the sale, and then they're missing the relationship.
right, right.
And
Good or
that's
bad.
where all the data lives, is in the relationship.
That's interesting.
That's where the transaction actually happens, is in the
Yeah,
relationship. And so actually when I lead trainings, whether it's sales or even with managers, as we're talking about how to get them to listen to their intuition and decode that for themselves, to train that in themselves, whether they're in a sales or hiring process or whatever it might be. That's part of it, is how do you start listening to what the person in front of you is saying, how they're saying it, what they're not saying,
yeah,
which is
right.
which is equally fascinating. What's not happening in this moment? What are they not saying about themselves?
Wow, it's got to be. I shouldn't say hard, but I would think that would be sort of a hard transition to make for someone who isn't used to tapping into their intuition. Like, we all have it, right? Everyone's
Yeah,
got intuition.
right. And so, yeah, you're exactly right. It's not easy stuff because it's very intangible. And so that's really what I'm trying to do here, is how do you make the intangible tangible?
Yeah.
Which
Well,
is, it's a tough task, but I feel like that's what my passion is about, is helping people get that they actually have this capacity, and that they can actually learn how to cultivate that relationship over time. So you're right, it does take practice. It does take time. It's almost like in basketball, you need to do some dribble drills and some of the
yeah,
basics before you can really play in the game.
yeah.
And
That's
so it takes patience, right? It takes a lot of patience to be willing to tune into what you're picking up on in some of these ways that you've never listened to before consciously.
right, right, exactly.
But
Yeah,
here's the thing, Diane. Like, imagine if I just mention this, I'm sure you can relate. Where, like, if you've been in a relationship too long and you were getting that gut hit, but you still stayed, or maybe like a career or a working relationship that just was going south and you knew it, but you did or did not say something. Like, we all are getting these messages all the time, and
yeah.
it's a matter of, are we listening, are we trusting, and are we taking action?
Yeah. Do you think it's so funny that you say that, because I'm thinking about like some organizations that I'm involved with, that's actually the thought process that I'm going through right now. Like there's a couple of them where I've thought, okay, I'm done. But I wonder if people don't pay attention to that because they feel obligation or guilt, or that there's some overriding emotion or thought process that's keeping them from accepting what their gut is telling them.
100%. And what I found in my research, and I think I'm writing a book about this very topic, and I have a
Yeah.
whole chapter dedicated to this very question around basically what are the barriers to intuition. And the top emotion, I would say, is fear. That
Really? Fear
that
of what?
A lot of times I find, in just looking at my own past, but also, of course, the data and research I've been doing, a lot of times it's the fear of the unknown. And
Oh,
if you think about it, our rational mind has us feel very comfortable. We get to feel very comfortable in the world that we know and how we can, predict on our spreadsheets how the next year is going to go. But reality is actually more chaotic than that, as we know. Like life has its own rhythm that we can't always predict, right? And so, to me, that's the beauty of intuition: is it helps us read out what's happening in real time more accurately if we're open to that, and it also helps us anticipate the future. So, if I'm listening to my intuition, it might take me to places that are very uncomfortable because it might go against my logical thinking.
right.
And so that's where I see a lot of fear show up. Is we have a very familiar way of doing something, but then we get this gut hit to lead our business in a whole different direction, or a product that is totally outside the box, that's a disruptor.
Yeah.
Yet
Okay.
this is exactly where this happens. Steve Jobs, for example, was famous for walking around barefoot around his neighborhood, to really tap into something else inside of him that was outside the normal day-to-day thinking.
Oh, that's interesting.
And he would get these amazing epiphanies and these intuitions for different products and development that was totally outside the box of what anyone was doing.
Really? That's interesting.
And the craziest thing is you can actually teach this stuff.
No. Wait. So, okay, because that was going to be my next question, but I have to take a sponsor break real quick. So hang on to that thought, okay?
Yes.
Okay, so Accelerate Your Business Growth podcast is happy to be sponsored by Audible.com. Audible.com is a leading provider of spoken digital audio entertainment and information. They have over 150,000 titles to choose from, and you can listen to them on any device, including whatever you're hearing us on right now. If you sign up at our link, which is audibletrial.com/businessgrowth, you get one free audiobook and a 1-month trial of the service. Some examples of books you can listen to on audible.com are 80/20 Sales and Marketing by Perry Marshall and The Go-Giver by Bob Berg. So visit audibletrial.com/businessgrowth, explore the books that are of interest to you, and receive one free audiobook when you sign up for the trial. Today, we're talking with Rick Snyder about the value of intuition in business success. Okay, so before we took the break, you said that this can be taught, that people can actually learn how to do this. So I'm fascinated. How?
This is the $1 million question.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's the thing: is that just thinking about it, our normal day-to-day thinking gets us so far, right? Logic gets us so far. We're able to do a lot of incredible things with our critical mind and our thinking mind. But sometimes we get to a limit. We get to a point where we've stared in front of the computer for, so many hours, and we just know that staring in front of it any longer is not going to get us to a solution. Or thinking harder is not going to get us to that next step. Yeah. So sometimes we literally have to disrupt how we're thinking or what we're doing. And so a lot of things that I'll implement when I'm working with a team, or if I'm working with some strategic decision makers and they're stuck on some kind of impasse for their business, we'll literally sometimes get out of the office and go for a walk, literally disrupt their environment and their way of thinking. Sometimes it's about taking a break like that. Sometimes it's just getting away from the computer, stretching, having some kind of state change where you're not just in the same kind of way of thinking, the same mode. I know some companies that actually bring in other jugglers or other kinds of physical things that get people out of their mind, literally out of their heads, and have them start to access connecting more with their body, with their, with other people on the team, with energy or emotions or whatever it might be. So there's a lot of different ways and creative ways to disrupt our normal day-to-day thinking, but it could even be like going to the gym, going for a run. I know some people that get their best epiphanies on a run. I think the key is to really figure out what works best for you and what is your way to tap into that deeper space. Some people like to meditate or do some kind of mindfulness practice. That's why, honestly, that's why Google and Apple and Zappos are hiring so many coaches or people who bring in, yoga, mindfulness, different alternative practices, because it's having this exact effect of having employees literally tap into deeper aspects of themselves that are outside the day-to-day normal way of thinking.
So this is really, so those organizations are bringing people in so that, it sounds to me like then that helps increase their creativity and their idea formation.
Yes, exactly. So creativity, idea formation, and to me, that's the birthplace of innovation.
Yeah.
So this is where it all connects, right? Because you're starting to tap into that deeper way of being and feeling and thinking that's not in our conscious. It's more in our subconscious and deeper in our bodies and in our being. And so what happens, especially if you're in a collective, you can actually start to feed off each other. That's where, if you start to do this in meetings or brainstorming sessions, and that's where the whole 1 + 1 = 3, where if you and I are talking, we might have a whole new inspiration that neither of us would have come up with just on our own.
Oh, I get it.
And so that's where the 1 + 1 = a third creation or innovation that we never would have just done in our silos.
Right.
And so that's where sometimes doing this with a group of people is very powerful, because everyone starts to open up into that collective space of creativity with each other.
Yeah, I get that. So speaking of creativity, you say that there's been a false war between the left and right sides of the brain. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, it's a bit of what we were speaking to earlier, where once again, there seems to be two camps where people are either pro left side of the brain, which is more that logical, practical, directional, linear side of how we think. And then the right side of the brain is really our creative, innovative, emotional, energetic aspects of how we think in our mindset. And so what I mean by a false war is really, what if they're not in conflict? What if there's really no need to make one more superior than the other? And from there, can we then agree that maybe we get more out of actually integrating the two instead of minimizing or demonizing one side of that equation?
Oh, okay. So, okay. So I'll tell you what, where I'm sort of stuck on that one, because I know a woman who is a really gifted creative. She's an artist and really, really tremendously talented. She also is a really good businesswoman. She thinks linear. It's really interesting to watch her, because usually that's not the case with people. So I'm just really curious about this. So if there's someone who's on the creative side of things, are you saying that they can really also tap into, what is that, the right side of their brain? Which side of their brain is that?
More the left. You mean more like the linear left side?
Yep. Yep.
Yes, I do think that's possible. Here's what I see. And once again, I also work a lot with creatives and, digital marketers and brand designers and artists and what have you.
Yeah.
And so one of the, what creatives consider a bad word or taboo is the word structure. They're almost allergic to structure, right? And so part of my job, when I'm coaching or consulting, is to help reframe how you can actually use structure to be more creative.
Oh, okay.
Instead of relating to structure like the enemy or, something like that, what I find is when you actually get clear about a system that optimizes how you perform in your company, and you start to implement those systems, it can actually free you up to be more who you are and be more creative in the work that you're there to do. So you don't have to worry about some of the administration stuff and some of the extracurricular parts of the work. You can just get on with the creative stuff once more of it is systemized. And so I find when creatives start to embrace structure instead of resist it, of course, making it a structure that works for their business and their culture
Right.
and what have you. But I find that they don't have to be opposites. They don't have to be enemies.
That's really interesting. I like that idea a lot. And I see what you're saying about it. And that's why I appreciate you answering that, because I couldn't see how those two things would live together, but I get it. I get it.
You know, Hemingway had a very famous quote, you know, obviously one of the most famous American writers of all time, very creative. And so he said, I only write when I'm inspired, and I happen to be inspired every day between 9 and 11 a.m.
Ah,
So in a way, he's kind of making fun of the whole thing where, you know, he was creative, but he had a system, he had a structure.
yeah.
And so he wasn't just saying only when I feel it or only when I'm spontaneous, but I happen to be spontaneous exactly between these times because otherwise I'm not going to get the thing written.
Yeah, that's interesting. Right, right. So that is a system. I think people probably don't see it that way. So helping them see that that's actually structure, and it's not bad, right? The structure isn't bad in that way. It gives them just a different way of looking at things.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
And like you're saying, like time management is a system, you know,
Right.
and how do we systemize our time and optimize our time? And I think if we, as business owners and managers especially, start to relate to it that way, they can really look at ways of getting more out of their day, getting more life back, actually.
Right, right. Exactly. It works for you instead of feeling like it's working against you. Yeah. It's interesting. So let's talk some about instinct, because you make a distinction between intuition and instinct, and I think sometimes people mix those up. So what for you is really the difference between those two?
Yeah, you know, this is once again it's like splitting really fine hairs, but I think it's important to do, especially as I'm here to define and work with intuition. So I have a personal interest in that. But really, the difference is for me around the word safety and survival. And so if I have a basic instinct, it's really somehow related to my sense of security, my sense of safety, my sense of survival. So if I see, you know, a burning house happening, a burning house situation, and there's a baby right there on the doorstep, and I don't even think about it, but I'm just immediately put into action to save the baby. For me, that's not necessarily an intuition. For me, that's my instinct. That's my instinct around survival, maybe around my tribe or my people or my neighbor, or just being just that good Samaritan that's inside of me. Whatever that is, there's just this natural way of thinking, of acting without even thinking. You know, it's really connected to our amygdala or our reptilian brain, which is all geared towards safety and survival.
Okay.
And so for me, intuition is not always about survival. A lot of times intuition can be about, you know, reading out once again, like social dynamics and what's happening in the workspace or during a team meeting. And imagine if you're doing an investment pitch or a presentation, you know, using your intuition to read out, you know, is the audience engaged? Is there something I can shift in mid-sentence that would have them be more engaged? Should I really go with the slide deck that I'd prepared? Like all those things are really using my intuition, but it really doesn't have anything to do with safety and survival in that same way.
I get it.
But it still, I mean, that's what I need to rely on to anticipate the needs of employees, customers, investors, et cetera.
Right, right. So, I'm debating between two different questions. Well, let's talk about employees for a minute. I struggle with this idea. It's funny, I was just thinking about this yesterday, where so many employers or managers, and I will say employees on the other side of it, really see the relationship as an us versus them as opposed to a we. So And I feel like that's one of those predispositions, one of those biases that some people have that gets in the way of their really, like interacting with each other effectively. So how would intuition play a role? Is this part of having an awareness, trying to be just more aware of the surroundings and not jumping to conclusions? Or like, what can a manager do to use their intuition more than their preconceived ideas of what they're expecting from their employees?
Yes, I love this question. So I'm going to take the analogy of waiting tables. And I used to wait tables back in the day in college and what have you. And one of the things I learned waiting tables is a good waiter has to be able to read out the table very quickly. And if you think about it, people come to restaurants for different reasons. Sometimes it might be a couple that's wanting a private moment with themselves and then they're more intimate and they actually don't want a lot of engagement from the waiter. There might be other times where a table is kind of bored or they're there for entertainment, not just to eat food, but to actually be entertained a bit, going out on a Friday night, for example. And so in that case, a waiter is able to read out that they want to be more engaging and funny and entertaining to that kind of table. And so really quickly, you learn how to read out the energies of the room, if you will, or of the table. And so in my opinion, management is no different. That to me, a really good manager is able to read out what each employee needs and to actually pay attention to the fact that each employee probably needs something a little bit different to continue to grow and develop as a leader themselves. So some employees might need a little closer management where they're checking in with you more often, you're building their confidence. Other staff might need more space where you actually back off more and give them more room to be autonomous. So I think a good manager is learning to use their social intuition to really tune into each staff member, not just see them as staff, but to actually see them as like Susan and Ronald and Frank and Richard or whoever it might be on the team. And so that way they're really tuning into the developmental growth of each person. And my opinion is when employees actually feel that, when they feel that the manager is taking a personal interest in their development, whether that's through one-on-one meetings or team meetings or what have you, or just even casually, not so formally, they actually thrive. And they feel like there's less of that barrier of the us versus them. And they're really being enrolled into a team culture, if you will.
That's terrific. So that's one of the ways that intuition helps develop culture within an organization. Is that right?
For sure. And I think, there are, every group that forms has their own rules and values and habits and ways that we do it here. And so I think, once again, it all starts in the hiring and recruiting, that you're hiring for a fit. It doesn't mean everyone needs to be the same, because you want diversity, you want difference. That's how you grow and learn and have a healthy and strong team. But on the core values, you want people who are resonant on where you're going and why you're going there. And so I think there's a cultural intuitive space, but then, I think that's where managers can really excel, is learning to tune into their staff more individually also, and really feel into what does so-and-so need to be a little bit of a better, to take more ownership this next year, or to step into their next role of advancement in the coming quarter. What would they need in particular?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. This is so interesting, because I am just sure that people really aren't thinking about intuition this way. I think sometimes their definition of intuition is that, it's that mother's intuition. Like, I know when something's going wrong with one of my kids, that it's really amorphous, and it really isn't something that has, concrete behavior or what's the word I'm looking for? Application that you can really be using. It's interesting.
Exactly. And I talk about three kinds of intuition. And so this might be interesting to some of your listeners also, is that one of them is more of like a directional intuition, which is more that kind of inner guidance, that inner gut hit about should we go left or right? Should we pull back on our budget this year or actually spend? What does our collective gut tell us? What's our inner compass tell us about certain strategies and choices? So that's directional intuition. I also talk about social intuition, which we were just talking about with managers and waiters at tables who are able to read out the relational space between a salesperson and a prospect, for example, and the nonverbal communication. To me, that's really, really good social intuition, which is also very much connected to emotional intelligence.
Yeah. I see
And then
that.
thirdly, the last intuition I talk about is informational intuition. And these are more the data scientists and the left brain people who are really good at pattern recognition, who are really good at breaking down code very fast and able to see and predict what's going to happen just on being able to grok information very quickly, faster than most people. And so that's a whole other side we haven't talked about as much, is people with financial expertise and innovators in those different fields around programming and coding, who just see the matrix, they see the code, and they're able to then make predictions based on that, whether it's like Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies or whatever it might be.
It's amazing. I mean, that to me, those people are amazing because it's just natural for them to be able to process information that way.
Exactly. And so I think all of us maybe have one or two, sometimes three of those that we're really learning to cultivate, those forms of intuition. But sometimes we might just have one that's really our superpower, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so fascinating to me. I just really am fascinated by this information. Talk to me some about why you say slowing down is an action step.
Yes. So one of the key components of tapping into your intuitive center is you have to slow down. You actually have to slow down from your normal way of thinking, your normal way of moving. And as we all know, we're in a world where we're getting flooded with information and outside stimulation and entertainment all the time, whether it's through our smartphone or media or whatever it might be. And so we actually have to slow down to tune into our deeper data center, our deeper rhythms that we're in, and information that we're getting. Because what I find is intuition is actually working on a different pacing, a different rhythm, and it's slower than our typical mind stream. And so that's why when you take a hot shower and you're kind of in a more relaxed space, sometimes you have your best intuitions in those moments. Or you're coming out of a dream and you're literally in that altered state for a few moments, and you get these amazing insights. That's why that happens in those spaces, because you're slowing down or you're in a slightly different state of mind. And they actually are tracking this now with neuroscience, that when you get out of your typical alpha wave brain states and you get into the deeper beta and gamma waves, that's where flow states and intuitional states are there to provide that information that we're looking for, or that we don't even know that we're looking for.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, I think that's key. You don't know what you're looking for many times, so you need to be able to be open to those thoughts and ideas coming to you.
Right, and that actually comes back to what you asked earlier. Like, that's why it's uncomfortable, because it's not familiar. And sometimes we get these insights out of nowhere and these intuitions out of nowhere that just don't seem to stack up and make logical sense to us. And sometimes it goes against the grain or our cultural norm.
Yeah.
That's when it gets really intense, when you have this strong feeling that your business partners are not going to like to hear.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And then what do you do in that situation when it's really clear that maybe you shouldn't make that hire, or you shouldn't go down that road of product development, and you feel very strong about it, but you're going to get into a battle around that with your colleagues?
Right. And the other thing I think about this is that people in leadership I think they believe they're supposed to have all of the answers. And so sometimes they're so focused on trying to come up with the answer that they're not allowing themselves to discover the answer.
Totally. You got that so right. Actually, Simon Sinek, you're familiar with him as well?
Sure. Yeah.
He's one of my favorites. I think he's doing an incredible work out there. He talks about that a lot, that, leaders should literally speak last in their meetings because they already know what they know and they know what they think. And a lot of times when a leader leads with, hey, here's what I think we should do. What do you guys think? Then immediately everyone else is going to agree with them and want to conform most likely to what the leader says. And Simon speaks to that very clearly. And so that's why I named him. But to me, you're exactly right. Like, what if you actually hold back on what you think you know, and you actually open up the space for, I don't know where we need to be next quarter, but I wanted to talk about that today. And I wanted to see what you guys feel in your gut hit of, should we go down road A or road B over here? And let's talk about that for the next 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And you can even feel right there how that opens up the space for innovation.
Exactly.
And that's what's missing, once again, I think a lot of times, is we don't, in how we use meetings, we don't often use meetings to really open up the space for strategic thinking and for innovation.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that is absolutely true. And that's something that I think is hurting a lot of organizations. They're so, it's this feeling of being closed, that, that they just can't get out of their own way. Wow. This is fascinating. So, I want to ask this question. Talk to me some about this thing you say that we should make allies with our inner critic. So what I'm curious about is, why do we need to do that? Because I think people, hate their inner critic. And then how do you actually do that?
Okay, it's great. It's a very rich question. We probably need a whole half hour just for that. So I'll try to give you the highlights here.
Okay, great.
So why should we make allies with our inner critic? Because of the very reason you just said. We usually hate our inner critic, or we're at war with our inner critic. And what I've learned, I used to study psychology. I have a master's in psychology, so I've learned about this from a different view. And our inner critic is part of who we are. And if we're always at battle internally with ourselves, then we're never going to be integrated. We're never going to be at peace with our choices and our decisions. And so how does that relate to intuition? Well, often inner critic is one of the top barriers, once again, to trusting our intuition. That's where the inner critic comes in, and that's where doubt lives. And so, I don't know if that's really true. Yeah, you had that gut feeling really strongly, but those happen all the time. Or, can you really trust that? That's just a feeling. And so that's where the critic really speaks so loudly. And often we're identified with the critic so closely that we forget it's a part of us. It's not all of who we are.
I love that.
Right?
That's
and so
awesome.
That's why we need to get space, because, if people knew all the things that my inner critic was saying throughout the whole day, I would be locked up.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
No doubt. And so that's living inside of us all the time. And so we can go to war with it, or try to ignore it, or push it down. And a lot of people, we all try our favorite coping strategies, but that doesn't really ever really work in the long term.
Okay. So I just love this, that if we embrace the idea that our inner critic is not all of us, it's just a part of us. That really hit me. I think that is, because it's so easy to get just totally wrapped up in that. Wow. I would like you to come back when the book is out, because I think we could just have even more conversation about this. It would just be so awesome. And then, everyone can get the book. So can I just say that I really appreciate you coming on and spending time with me. I have had so many ahas during this conversation that I am certain that the listeners have as well. So thanks.
I'm appreciative of that. Thank you so much for sharing that. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do here is inspire, but also really in a practical way so we can take these tools that we all have somewhere in us and actually bring them to our world and be more of ourselves at work and also in our lives.
Yeah. It's great. It's wonderful. This is really great work that you're doing. So will you tell my listeners how they can find you and, anything? I know the book's not ready yet, but anything you've got going on that they should know?
Yeah. So you can find me on my website. My company is called 3 Hats. And so that is 3 spelled out, THREE -hats, HATS.com. So 3-hats.com. And you'll find my business. So I do business development coaching where I help companies grow and looking at the areas they need to grow, as well as build more intuitive thinking and decision making like we're talking about today, whether that's with your sales teams, your hiring teams and strategies, management, leadership. So I bring a lot of trainings into different companies that are interested in this work. So you can find me there. And then the book that we're referring to, it's called The Invisible Edge, 6 Steps for Harnessing Your Intuition to Succeed in Business. And that should be coming out late 2018. And Diane, I would be happy to come back when that's getting closer.
Great. That's wonderful. Thank you. Well, we will get that figured out because I would love to have you back. So very good. So, and thank you again. Thank you. I also want to thank the listeners. You guys are why we're here. So thanks for tuning in. And our sponsor, please remember to visit audibletrial.com/businessgrowth to sign up for your free trial and get a free audiobook. As always, continue to prosper and be curious. And now I will say, and be open to your intuition and tap into it for the greater good. And until we meet again on another episode of Accelerate Your Business Growth, goodbye and good day.
Are you tired of the same old productivity hacks? Have you read the top 20 books on effectiveness, and yet your workdays and email inbox still causing anxiety, burnout, and even depression? Ready to learn the latest in brain-based modalities, techniques, and technologies to optimize your success and well-being? Welcome to the Focus to Evolve podcast, where we'll illuminate your path to spacious productivity and balanced thriving. Each week, we dive into deeply insightful and immediately impactful methods to help you become highly effective while promoting health, profitability, and well-being. Say goodbye to the trance of busyness and hello to your highest potential. It's time to discover a new way of accelerating your mission, growth, and purpose. Join us on the Focus to Evolve podcast and get ready to live your most joyful, productive, and fulfilling life.